Rico, welcome to the Sanity Showcase Meetup.
Yeah, this is fun. I got some. I hastily made a demo this morning, and I think
Oh,
it turned out pretty good. So
excellent.
riding that high.
Excellent. Rico, before you go on, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, that sounds good. My name is Rico. I work on the SDK team. So I've been kind of building these hooks for all of y'all, and hopefully you've been enjoying them. So that's what I've been doing. I've been at
Uh,
Sanity for 2 years, 3 years now, maybe. There's like yeah, but anyway.
did you want to show us this demo that you've got first, and we'll go from there?
Yeah, I think that sounds good if we want to do it like that.
Yeah, let's try and share your
Let's do
screen,
that.
and hopefully your internet holds up.
Yes. Okay, can you see my screen?
I can, and I'm going to just put us over the top of it.
All right. So right here, I have just a very simple app. Made it this morning.
And this is with
But I
the
think this one
Sanity
was
App
fun.
SDK is what Rico's showing us here.
Yes, I used the Sanity App SDK, and I also used this library, Ink. So I don't know if you know where I'm exactly going with this, but Ink is, it's a React implementation, or yeah, like a React renderer that is for terminal. So
Huh.
I think we can just start by showing it off.
Can you zoom up a bit for us
So
there in your editor?
zoom
Yeah.
in. Yeah, let's see. Is that a little
Yeah, that's a
better?
bit better.
Okay, sweet. So here I have just, I ran my app, and I have a little, terminal based. I'm using the SDK in the terminal. So I know today our kind of theme is like Sanity beyond web apps. This is not a web app. It's still very much Sanity. I think it kind of fits the ticket. So just the same sort of thing. I can just kind of tab around, and then kind of pick which one I want to see. So let's open up this bananas document, and now I have that document open here. Yeah, does that make sense? Maybe we can do this a little bit more like stop me, question answer style.
Yeah, so let's pump the brakes, because I think my mouth's open, and I get the impression that some of your colleagues even are as well by the messages I'm seeing in the chat. So this is Sanity App SDK, which is a series of headless data fetching and mutation hooks for React. So then you can take anything in the React ecosystem and wire it up with querying Sanity documents and making mutations in Sanity documents. But then you've put that through a React library that generates a terminal app. And so now we're looking at,
Yes.
Sanity data fetching rendered into the terminal via React.
And what's cool about this is it's Sanity, and Sanity is, well, hold on. It may be my internet again, but Sanity is Sandy. So let me see. Where is this? If I change this, we should see it update in real time as well. Here, let me find a better. Yeah, so the name is down here. Let me edit that.
We now have consistent ordering for keys on responses. Did you know that? I only found that out the other day. Used to be when you would
I
query
did
stuff
not
in
know
Grok, the attributes would come through in a random order. That's now been stabilized
that.
recently. I would have made a big deal about that if I had known it at the time, but I failed my job in marketing to let everybody know that.
That's very nice. I did not know. Thank you for making me aware. But yeah, it's live. It's up to date. I could have gone further with this. I could have made like a JSON editor, but for now, I just with the time I had. But still, like kind of creating something like this doesn't take too much time with the SDK. And it's this has been like something I've been wanting to kind of experiment with. So it's kind of cool to see it to life.
Yeah, I think that's been something I've been mentioning a few times when speaking about App SDK, and it's something I probably stole it from you, admittedly, is that like this is just something that we always wanted, was like a far simpler set of primitives to query and mutate content, because then you can just focus on building an application, whether that's a Kanban board in a React app or whether that's something in your terminal for whatever reason. But the point of what you just showed there a moment ago is so key, is that yes, we get used documents to query documents, but that's actually a live connection to real-time updates from those documents as well. So you don't have to think about listeners and think about subscriptions. It's the batteries included nature of the App SDK, which is really amazing. It's not just replacing client.fetch, it's replacing client subscribe or listen, or setting up a real-time listeners using the real-time API. It's a replacement for all of that stuff. So all you have to do is run a use documents query, and it will give you all of this real-time updates for free, which is very cool.
Oh, yeah. I'll show that off in just a little bit as well. I'm just trying to find the right document here. There we go. So it's a little bit smaller all on the screen.
Yeah, there you go. So that live update.
If you didn't know, just change the title. Let me do hello. I don't know, everyone. And then here, hello everyone changes there, and hello everyone will change up there as well, all in the console, which is pretty cool.
That's so cool.
Should we go into the code?
Yeah, let's jump into the code.
All right. It's really not too bad. It starts off with an app, and the way that Ink works is there's just there's a render function, and you call that render function, and that's it. Like I was actually really surprised. I'm using TSX, which is something I just like TypeScript, and this is something that lets me execute TypeScript easily. So here's my command. It's TSX source app.tsx, and here's that app. From here, I'm calling this render function from Ink, and I'm just using the SDK. And just like that, it kind of works. Oh, I guess another thing to add is I do have my token in here. I just have this, so we allow passing in a token directly. So I'm grabbing one just from my environment variables.
There you go. That did answer a question as to how this app was able to work outside of the dashboard. So
yes, yeah, it's because I hard coded a token.
Yes, which you should be aware that token would then end up in the client bundle should you deploy this, right?
Yeah, but I'm not deploying this. No, website.
No, but it's
you're still website brain.
It's good. It's good to be mindful of these things. That just because Rico did it for this demo, you should not do this in production.
Yeah, I agree.
Until you hear otherwise.
Right. All right. So here's the app layout. I'm using Ink has these primitives called box and text, and they map to a div with Flexbox, and you can kind of put a layout in things. So I have a few components here. The first one is a document type list, and if we go into this, you'll see that I'm using the SDK again. I'm using use query, and I'm grabbing all the document types using just array unique, grabbing all the types, so start and end. Then I'm grabbing the total count of those. So I'm using that to sort of come up with some pages, do some pagination this way. And then I can kind of show each different one here.
That's really clever, because the use query hook is one that, I've probably gone too far or too over the top to warn people from not using it, but it has its uses within the App SDK, but there's hooks for fetching a list of documents of the same type or of similar types. But yeah, the use query hook still has some quite good utility, and that's an interesting use case there to get very specific data from the data set.
I think use query is I think we want people to use documents when it makes sense to, but if you're kind of trying to do something outside of the bounds of use documents, so if you're not trying to grab a list of documents, then use query is perfectly fine to use. So.
Yeah, just to use the right hook for the right situation, I suppose, because the theme of both talks today is trying to move on or go beyond just websites and using Sanity as a CMS. And yeah, when you're building a Next.js website or something like that, you probably have been writing monster grok queries to get everything all in one, massive client.fetch, where now we can break things up, use queries where they make sense, but then use the other data fetching hooks where they make sense as well. And it's cool that you've got options to pick the right hook for the right part of the application.
Oh, yeah. All right, so what this is, I have this component, and you'll see this one pop up a few more times, but it's called pane layout. And I think this is a pretty good pattern. Whenever you need to have like a shared layout between different things. This is especially useful for writing suspense boundaries. So just to go back here, I'm reusing that same component to write some suspense boundaries. Let's go back. There's a header and footer for this, and then the children below is sort of like what's going on. And this select component is actually made from just another pre-made ink select component. So this is ink select input.
This is really stretching the bounds of of showing how App SDK was designed to be headless, right? And I think the examples we've given is like use Tailwind or use Radix or use Shed CN, where this is like use a terminal
Don't even
package.
use the browser,
Yeah, use a terminal. Like as far as you want to, fetch and render content. I'm surprised you don't have a PDF demo. Actually, that's usually I see you as the PDF guy.
Demo. I haven't done that before. I remade Wordle before, and I made that as PDFs, and I put it on like WordlePDF.com. Posted it online a few places. It got some traction. Long story short, they banned me from Vercel because I used up all the free stuff. It was a good time. So server side rendered PDFs, maybe not the best idea. You can do that with Sanity.
You can do anything you like.
All right. Let's go through the next component right here. So this is I just call it document list, and it takes in that document type. So let me just go back just so we can see the kind of how all this works. There is some state in here. There's some state for the document type. I'm calling set document type just like on select. Then when that document type gets populated, it will render this branch right here. There's a suspense boundary because all of the SDK components suspend, so it's good practice just to wrap what you can suspense if you're not sure what you're doing. You also could start a transition additionally. But within here, inside of this document list, if we open it up, that same document type is now defined. It's being passed into use paginated documents because I don't have to remake the pagination logic because we kind of have a hook for pagination.
Excellent, because pagination in Grok is tricky, to say the least.
Yes, and it allows us to kind of optimize that over time, so we don't have you don't have to worry too much about it. So here, use paginated documents, just pass in the document type. I have a hard-coded page size, and then the data comes back. So remember, these are document handles, which have a bunch of other things in there. And with those document handles, I'm taking them and kind of putting them into the items like this. So what's kind of weird about this API is like this is the select thing from React Inc. This component has an item component, so you can kind of pass in a component to it itself. And if you look back at my implementation for this item component, it's in line right here. So the item there, we scroll up, it's right here. I am including a suspense boundary with fallback. And I'm using this document preview component. So this one, it's kind of interesting because the items are, they have to be a string. So in order to kind of get around that, I just JSON stringify the handle. Works perfectly fine. And then parse it back. So this at least lets me reuse this nice reusable component.
Yeah.
So here I take the document preview, use document preview just to grab the title and subtitle. And, here it is. This is a very simple sort of document preview component, but it kind of does the job.
Yeah. And so, on the left-hand side, you've got the select for all of the unique document types of the data set. And then the middle panel is the documents of the selected type. And it's essentially, these are the panes of the Sanity Studio, but in the terminal.
Yep. That was the idea.
That's so cool.
And we could do a whole lot more with it. And then just to finish off walking through all the code, there's one more. There's a document viewer component. So this has a selected document. This document list, it has an onSelect prop that I put in here. And then when you select it, it just takes that same label with onSelect from this and just parses it and sends that back out.
That's cool. Now, going through a number of those code examples, this is one of the things that really surprised me the first time I started working with App SDK is there's suspense boundaries everywhere. And it's kind of shocking at first, but it makes sense to me now that I've used Suspense some more. And again, not something I'd used building server-side rendered websites, but something I've now learned to use a lot through SPAs. So like if Suspense is a new thing to people, outside of the context of like lazy loading components, I think that was the only reason I'd ever used Suspense before. What's sort of why have we had to use Suspense so liberally throughout the app?
Yeah. So we kind of made the decision to make all of our APIs suspenseful, which is just kind of goes to say that they just suspend. All of our hooks will suspend, and the benefit of that is that there is no more like checking to see if the data is ready. You don't get a choice. The hook only renders when the data is ready. So this kind of makes it seem like the original cell, at least from like the React team, when they were kind of talking about suspense, is you can treat data as if it were synchronous data, like it's right there. So if I hover over even this use document, you'll see that there's no sort of like loading state on here. If I go to let me go to the document type list. So this one, use query does have an is pending, but this is not something that you should check before you render something. This is, it almost maps to like is stale, because this means if the component rendered at all, then it has data. There's never a case where it will render without data because of suspense. Instead of it like rendering, it would rather suspend. So this is pending flag is only here when there's like new data currently in the works, and then there's the current data on the screen is stale. So that's why I say like is pending kind of maps more to is stale. So a common like pitfall I see is a lot of people will do like is pending, if is pending, return loading. That's not what this is for anymore. With suspense, you can kind of suspend, or you can what's nice about this as well is it kind of collapses all of your loading states. So, we have multiple hooks that have loading states, and we want the hooks themselves to be responsible for, determining when the component itself should resume. So this kind of like takes away the burden of having to like check those different loading states. You can have multiple hooks at once and they all kind of work correctly and do the nice thing.
And it lets you determine where the boundaries are too, doesn't it? Because if each component is suspenseful and each one needs to load, then you deliberately make every small component render a spinner or something, or you can let a parent component completely fall back to a loading state if it needs to, it only takes a little bit of experiment, like a little bit of usage to get your head around it, but it feels like a lot at first, but I think it makes sense pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's really nice. I think I like I think like in general React has kind of been putting out this like boundary patterns. So like suspense is actually it's a boundary itself. Like the suspense component is a boundary, but in the same way that the suspense component is a boundary, like an error boundary is kind of like what maybe more people are used to in the same sort of way. So if something throws, if your component errors, then an error boundary will catch it. So in the same sort of like analogous sense, if a hook or a component suspends, then it'll show the like nearest suspense boundary, and that's kind of how that works. It's nice because there's that cascade catch-all kind of thing, which is nice.
And once again, kind of like how we looked at with Ryan, that like the function sort of tucks away a lot of the difficulty that we don't need to deal with, so we can just focus on the problem-solving part. The idea, again, just one of my knee-jerk reactions to using SDK was like, what do you mean I'm doing like 50 different components that all do their own individual fetches? That seems crazy. But under the hood of the App SDK is like you guys are handling like deduplication, caching locally, and all that sort of thing. So it should not nearly be as resource intensive as it perhaps seems at first.
Yeah, we do a lot of batching behind the scenes as well. So like I guess one of the maybe one thing I should explain real quick is like why I use documents is kind of how it is. So instead of getting like the full document, you kind of get this handle, and you're supposed to resolve the handle later. The idea behind that is just sort of enable this like progressive loading behaviors. So we can actually observe it from just kind of tabbing around here. So as I kind of like go through these, you'll see it like kind of progressively load in all of my stuff like that, which is cool. And because it kind of caches the previous version, when I go back, you don't see it's loading again. It's because we have that data there already. So when I'm kind of going through, it's there. And while it's like there, if anything ended up changing, so maybe let's go back. Let's try this out real quick. So there is, where's our hello everyone? There's this hello everyone. Let me go to the next page, and then I'm going to change this. I'll add like 3 exclamation points. So in the SDK tries to be efficient about like what is on the screen and what's subscribed at once. So, that hello everyone, it's off the screen, but it's still cached. So once it goes on the screen again, it will fetch for new data and then, show the result. So if we go back here, it should be super quick, but it'll be hello world with no exclamation points, and the 3 exclamation points will come back. Yep. Did you see it? It was very quick.
Admittedly, I missed it, but I'll go back and watch the slow-mo replay to believe
right? It was like a few frames. It might not even, but I promise I saw it on my screen. But we try to be very efficient about how everything is loading in and all that.
And some of these hooks are optimistic and some of them aren't they? So like a used document is like optimistic and local, where like used document projection is like eventually consistent. Is that correct? Have I used the right words to explain how those two work?
There's some context with like the optimistic that needs, I think, to be there. And like, I guess the thing is the app SDK lets you edit data, and like, optimistic updates is not, optimistic hooks is not, it doesn't make sense without like, the editing half of it. So if you're not editing the document, then you don't necessarily need to have like an optimistic version, if that makes sense. And what that kind of means is just like there's a version of a document that you're editing that's local to the SDK. And the SDK, there's lots of logic in there to make sure that like when you're editing a document, it's synchronous. Like those edits appear as soon as you press a key, and we want to make sure it's uniform across anytime you're using it. So, if you're ever using use document and use edit document, we want it to feel like synchronous React state. So you're just, it's the same thing as calling set state. Calling edit document is the same thing as calling set state. So if you are kind of pushing data to it, then it would be nice that, everywhere around that they also kind of got those updates as you're like typing in your keyboard and you're seeing things change in real time. But sometimes it's not. So the ones that aren't optimistic right now, which is use document projection and use document preview, those will be edited by the live content API. So we have a live content API, and it gives us notifications when data changes. So we listen to those and we re-render when things changes. So I can kind of demo that just in the studio. So if I just maybe I can do these side by side. Move that over. Here, it's kind of small, but here's just our hello everyone, and then here's the title hello everyone. This one is optimistic, and it's a little bit like quicker. It ends up using it uses listeners, and it like listens to the mutations as they're being sent from another client or the current one, and it will apply them synchronously, right? Or as soon as it can here. Then at this point, this will update later as like the data comes in and changes. So that ended up, that came first, then it was this one. But they both update.
We solved this in the App SDK course on Sanity Learn. If you like to take the course, by what I did in the end was the list of documents all use document projection, but the selected document uses use document. So the editing pane and the selected document both have the exact same edits because, like you say, it's synchronous. It feels like local state. But all of the not selected documents, they will all just receive updates. So there's still multiplayer in real time in that if other people are making changes to the documents, those changes will show up in half a second, but they won't show up in the same millisecond like your optimistic use document updates.
Yeah, and I think there are some like opportunities to potentially make things optimistic if it can be by default, if it's kind of applicable to. because we kind of have that local cache of all the documents there, it's kind of, free to check it. So we can just check to see if it's there. If not, fall back to the live content API.
Yeah.
So maybe there's opportunities to make everything optimistic, but we're kind of still prioritizing and figuring out what makes sense.
Yeah, we'll start wrapping up. I mean, this has been one of my favorite things that's been released. So, like, I could talk about it for a long time, and I'm sure you could too. Is there anywhere? Is it without committing to anything? Is there anything in the future of the App SDK that you sort of are excited to do next? I do want to say it's so full featured, and we could have shipped a much simpler, more boring version of this. Like, it didn't need to have optimistic updates. Like, it would have been a useful library if it was just a bunch of data fetching hooks, but like, it's already so deep and so very fully featured. But like, what's still left unsolved that you're hoping to tackle soon?
Yeah, well, we kind of released this whole dashboard thing, and we have like this concept of many apps together. So I think up in the future, we really want to make that more of like an ecosystem rather than just like a set of isolated apps. So at least right now, what we're working on is something called app intents. So app intent, as in like you intend to open something or you intend to edit or view something. So that's going to be like a system for apps to sort of declare what they can do, if they can edit something, if they can like view or preview something potentially. And then with all that, like there's kind of a discoverability aspect to that as well. So other apps should be able to discover and like see what other apps can do. And once you have that sort of technology, like that, those primitives together, you can tell an app to open up another, this document list could just show an intent link, and that intent link or something like that could open it up to the app that's like meant to edit that. So
Yeah.
I think those things are kind of coming up really soon.
That sounds cool. There's a question about speaking of error boundaries, and I think that this is actually one for me because I'm responsible for a number of the demos. There don't seem to be any error boundaries in use in any of the demo apps so far. That's probably on me. I just expect you don't get errors when you fetch data with Sanity. So like, why would you need an error boundary? That's literally just I haven't done that. I suppose this is one of the interesting things when
I think we should.
we should. It's one of the interesting parts of putting all this Sanity stuff into the React ecosystem because. Like I published an App SDK best practices guide, which I know is ridiculous for something that's been out for a few weeks. And I just came in like I'm the last person in the world to, there's so many engineers worked on the thing, but there's some Reactisms that you need to get out of your head. So things like controlled inputs, which you do in every React app. It's better to be editing the document directly on Sanity rather than saving something in local state and then submitting a form. So that's one example. So yeah, trying to demonstrate what are the React things that you should do with App SDK and what are the React things that you shouldn't do are good. So yeah, we probably should put an example of an error boundary somewhere to show how that becomes useful.
Yeah. And we're trying to sort of unify the SDK hooks so that they throw during render, basically meaning that the error boundaries will pick them up. So if even if you get a network error, you should be able to wrap it in an error boundary and see the appropriate error. At least that's the hope.
Yeah. Awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to cover off? Otherwise, we might leave it there.
I think that's it. Yeah. I think that this was fun.
Definitely. Thank you very much for the demo. I think Terminal UI is the hottest thing on Twitter at the moment. So I'm going to take some screenshots of this and get it over there to try and get some clout. So thanks for that, Rico. And thanks everybody for joining us.